June 4th, 1942. 7:10 a.m. over the Pacific Ocean northwest of Midway Atoll. The sky is clear, almost insultingly calm. At 15,000 feet, Lieutenant Saburo Sakai adjusts his oxygen mask and scans the horizon. The engine of his Mitsubishi, a 6M0, hums smoothly beneath him. A familiar sound, comforting, trusted. Below, the Pacific stretches endlessly, flat and blue, giving no hint that history is about to tilt. Sakai is not afraid. Why would he be? For months now, Japanese naval aviators have ruled the sky. They've outturned, outclimbed, and outflown every American aircraft sent against them. Buffaloes burn. Wildcats spiral helplessly. American pilots die confused, never understanding what hit them. Up here, in the thin air, the Zero feels like an extension of Sakai's body. Light, responsive, deadly. Then, a speck, 12 o'clock high. Sakai squints. Another speck, then another. Dark shapes against the sun, growing fast. "American fighters," he mutters into the radio. No tension in his voice, just routine. He banks left, confident the enemy will do what they always do: turn, bleed speed, die. The Zero was built for this kind of fight, designed to dominate the sky through agility alone. No armor, no self-sealing fuel tanks, no excess weight, just the assumption that no one would ever touch it. The Americans dive. Something feels off. They don't turn. They don't scatter. They come straight through the formation, guns blazing, then climb away. Fast. Too fast. Sakai blinks. He rolls his Zero hard, pulling tight into a climbing turn that would have broken the wings off most aircraft. The American fighter doesn't follow. It keeps climbing. "What?" someone says over the radio. Sakai watches as the aircraft levels off above him. For a brief second, he gets a clear look at it. Stubby wings, thick fuselage, rugged silhouette. Not elegant, not graceful, not impressive. But it shouldn't be up there. The Zero was supposed to own the vertical. Everyone knew that. It was doctrine, gospel. The foundation of Japanese air superiority. Yet the American plane isn't stalling, isn't wobbling, isn't dying. It's waiting. A burst of tracer fire slices past Sakai's canopy. He jerks the stick instinctively, heart pounding for the first time that morning. These Americans aren't fighting the way they're supposed to. They're not trying to outturn the Zero. They're doing something else. Something dangerous, something that doesn't care about elegance or tradition, or even survival. Sakai glances at his fuel gauge, then at the sky above him, suddenly crowded with enemy aircraft that refuse to play by the rules. For the first time since the war began, a thought flickers through his mind. What if we were wrong? The radio crackles with urgent voices. A wingman shouts. Another goes silent mid-sentence. Sakai tightens his grip on the controls. The Americans have learned something. And whatever it is, it's about to change everything. The doctrine shock. The American fighters don't stay. They never stay. They slash through the Japanese formation like knives, fire in short, brutal bursts, then pull away. Upward, always upward, back into altitude and safety. No tight turns. No prolonged dogfights. No honor-bound spirals. Just violence. Then distance. Lieutenant Sakai forces his Zero into a climb, muscles straining against the G-forces. The aircraft responds beautifully, just as it always has. The Zero can climb. Everyone knows this. But the American fighter climbs too. Not as gracefully, not as cleanly, but relentlessly. Sakai watches the distance between them refuse to close. Below, another Zero bursts into flame. The pilot never ejects. There is no time. "This is wrong," someone barks over the radio. "They're not turning." That is the problem. Japanese naval aviation doctrine is built on one assumption. The enemy will try to dogfight. Turn radius equals victory. Agility equals survival. From the first day of flight training, pilots are taught to lure the enemy into a turning battle, bleed their speed, trap them, kill them. But the Americans don't want to dance. They want to strike. Sakai levels off, breath sharp in his mask. He spots one of the American planes below him now, pulling out of a dive. For a moment, instinct takes over. He rolls inverted, drops the nose, and goes after it. The Zero screams as it accelerates. This is it. This is what the aircraft was built for. The distance closes fast. Sakai lines up the shot. Just a second longer. The American plane suddenly dives straight down. Not a gentle descent, a near vertical plunge. Sakai follows for a heartbeat, then stops. He has seen this before. Zeros can't dive like that. Push too hard, and the controls stiffen. The airframe begins to shudder. Pull too late and the wings may not come back with you. The American fighter disappears beneath him, accelerating like a falling stone. Sakai pulls out, cursing. Above him, another American aircraft rolls over and dives, this one aimed at a different Zero. The Japanese pilot never sees it coming. Tracer rounds tear through the cockpit. Gone. This isn't skill versus skill, it's physics versus tradition. The Americans are using altitude as a weapon, speed as armor. They trade turning ability for survivability, firepower, and discipline. They attack only when conditions favor them, and refuse combat when they don't. Sakai feels something colder than fear settle in his chest. Understanding. The Zero was designed for a war that no longer exists. Lightweight construction once meant supremacy. Now it means vulnerability. One solid burst from the Americans' heavy machine guns is enough to shred fuel lines, ignite tanks, rip through flesh. And the Americans don't waste shots. They don't chase kills. They attack formations, break cohesion, create chaos. A voice cracks over the radio. Too calm, too measured. For a moment, Sakai mistakes it for Japanese. It's English. The Americans are talking to each other, coordinating, calling targets, executing passes like clockwork. This isn't desperation. It's a system. Sakai watches as 3 American fighters dive in sequence, one after another, never overlapping, never colliding, each covering the other's escape. A team. Japanese pilots are taught to trust instinct, individual mastery, the blade-like precision of the lone warrior. The Americans trust procedure. And procedure doesn't panic. Sakai banks hard to avoid another pass, sweat running down his back despite the cold altitude. Around him, the sky feels smaller now, more dangerous. Not because the Americans are better pilots, but because they've stopped trying to be. And as the engagement breaks apart, Sakai realizes something even more unsettling. This wasn't an ambush. This was practice. The moment of recognition. The battle drifts east, away from Midway, pulled by speed and gravity. Lieutenant Saburo Sakai glances at his ammunition counter. Less than half. Fuel steady, for now. The Zero still feels light in his hands, obedient, eager to turn and fight. But the sky has changed. The Americans no longer appear as scattered threats. They move with purpose now, pairs sliding through altitude bands, one high, one low. Covering angles Sakai was never trained to watch. He spots a Zero below him, locked in a turning fight with an American fighter. The Japanese pilot is good, very good. Each turn is tighter than the last. The Zero carves clean circles through the sky, forcing the American wider and wider. For a moment, Sakai feels relief. There. That's how you beat them. The American brakes, not outward, up. The Japanese pilot follows instinctively. One more turn, one more pull. Then the American's wingman appears. Out of the sun, the Zero explodes in a white-orange flash. No radio call, no warning, just absence. Sakai swallows hard. This is not a duel, it is a trap. He remembers the briefings before the war, the dismissive laughter when intelligence officers described American aircraft as overweight, underpowered, poorly designed. The jokes about American pilots relying on machines instead of skill. But machines are exactly the point. The American aircraft can take hits. Self-sealing fuel tanks close around punctures. Armor plates catch fragments that would slice through a Zero pilot's spine. Thick wings hold together under stresses that would tear Japanese fighters apart. Sakai feels exposed. Every time tracer fire flashes past his canopy, he knows how thin the metal around him really is. Knows how close death rides in every engagement. Below, an American fighter takes a hit. Smoke trails from its wing. It doesn't fall. It keeps flying. That should not be possible. Sakai dives, lining up a firing solution, cannons thudding as shells streak toward the target. He sees impacts, sees pieces fly. Still, the American aircraft refuses to die. It rolls, dives, and vanishes into cloud cover. Sakai pulls up, breathing hard. In training, victory meant outmaneuvering the enemy until he made a mistake. Here, the Americans don't give you that chance. They design their tactics around reducing the cost of mistakes. They assume pilots will get hit. They build planes that forgive it. The realization lands like a weight. Japanese air doctrine demands perfection. American doctrine expects failure and survives it. The radio erupts with fragmented calls, fuel warnings, broken formations, orders to disengage. Disengage. That word was rare once, almost shameful. Now it is necessary. Sakai turns toward the west, throttling back just enough to conserve fuel. Behind him, the Americans do not pursue. They don't need to. They've already taken what they wanted. As the distance opens, Sakai watches the American fighters regroup in the distance, climbing back to altitude, reforming cleanly. No celebration, no chasing stragglers, just reset. That terrifies him more than aggression ever could, because it means this battle was not chaos. It was repeatable, and if it can be repeated, it can be refined. Sakai realizes this is not about Midway, not about today. This is about the future of air combat, and Japan is flying yesterday's war into tomorrow's sky. The Zero carries him away from the fight, intact, but the certainty he brought into the morning is gone, and it will not be coming back. The design philosophy divide. Weeks later, the lesson still burns. Lieutenant Saburo Sakai sits in a dimly lit briefing room, the air heavy with cigarette smoke and unspoken tension. A chalkboard stands at the front. On it, rough sketches of American fighters, thick wings, wide fuselages, ungainly shapes that offend every instinct of a Japanese aviator. An intelligence officer taps the board with a pointer. Grumman F-4F Wildcat, he says. And now, a newer model entering service, the F-6F Hellcat. A murmur ripples through the room. Hellcat. The name sounds crude, aggressive, unrefined. Sakai leans forward. The officer explains what Sakai has already felt in combat. These aircraft are not built to be beautiful. They are built to absorb punishment. Armor behind the pilot. Bullet-resistant glass. Fuel tanks that seal themselves when hit. And engines, massive engines, designed to drag the aircraft out of mistakes. Japanese engineers pursued purity, range, agility, the perfect turn. American engineers pursued margin. Margin for error, margin for damage, margin for pilots who were still learning. The officer draws 2 circles on the board. This, he says, pointing to the smaller one, is the Zero's turning radius. He taps the larger circle. This is the Hellcats. Several pilots smirk. Then the officer draws a vertical arrow, long, steep. This, he continues, is where we are losing pilots. Altitude, speed, energy. The Americans don't try to win the turn. They win the engagement. Sakai's fingers tighten unconsciously. He remembers the Wildcat that refused to die. The Hellcat, if the reports are true, is even worse. Thicker skin, heavier guns, faster dives, better radios, and most importantly, numbers. Factories in places Sakai has never seen, Detroit, Long Island, California, are producing aircraft at a pace that defies comprehension. Losses are replaced in weeks, sometimes days. Japanese aircraft losses are not. Each Zero represents careful craftsmanship, skilled labor, limited resources, months of work. Each dead pilot represents something even rarer. experience. In the Pacific, experience is everything. But experience cannot be mass-produced. The Americans understand this. Their doctrine doesn't revolve around preserving the machine. It revolves around preserving the pilot. Planes are tools. Pilots are investments. The Zero was designed to never be hit. The Hellcat is designed to come home. Sakai leaves the briefing with a knot in his chest. The solution is obvious. More armor, heavier weapons, better radios, but the cost would be everything the Zero was built to be. You cannot add weight without sacrificing range. You cannot add protection without losing agility. There is no easy fix. In the months that follow, the sky fills with Hellcats. Young American pilots, some barely out of training, fly them with confidence that borders on arrogance. They make mistakes, plenty of them, and they survive. Japanese pilots cannot afford the same luxury. Every engagement now feels like a gamble where the odds worsen by the day. Veteran pilots fall. New pilots replace them too quickly, trained in haste, sent aloft without the instincts that once defined Japanese air superiority. Sakai understands now. This war in the air will not be decided by who flies better today. It will be decided by who can still fly tomorrow. And the Americans are building tomorrow faster than Japan can imagine. When expectation met reality. October 25th, 1944, 6:40 a.m., over the Philippine Sea, near Leyte Gulf. The dawn is grey and restless, the clouds low and broken like torn cloth. Below, the sea churns with fleets converging, steel, smoke, and wake lines stretching to the horizon. A young Japanese pilot, Ensign Hiroshi Tanaka, steadies his hands on the controls of his Zero. He has fewer than 120 flight hours. No combat victories, no illusions. He has heard the stories, how the Americans used to turn and die, how now they don't, how their fighters climb like elevators and dive like stones, how they come in pairs and leave together. Ahead of him, specks appear, dozens of them, Hellcats. They are bigger than Tanaka expected, thicker, almost blunt. They hold formation easily, wings barely moving as turbulence rolls through the sky. Tanaka's section leader gives the order to attack. The Zeros accelerate. The Americans don't break. They wait. At the last moment, the Hellcats split, some diving, some climbing, turning the sky into layers of motion. Tanaka tries to pick a target, but everything happens too fast. Tracers rip past him. The Zero shudders as rounds punch through the wing. Warning lights flash. He is hit and still alive. That surprises him. He pulls hard, instinct screaming to turn, to outmaneuver. The Zero responds, but a Hellcat stays with him, not turning as tightly, but never leaving the fight. It doesn't need to. Another Hellcat appears from above. Tanaka shoves the throttle forward, dives. The airframe vibrates violently. He eases off, terrified of losing control. The Hellcat behind him does not. It follows. Rounds slam into the fuselage. The cockpit fills with smoke. The engine coughs. Tanaka thinks of the instructors who told him the Zero was unbeatable in the right hands. He wonders whose hands they meant. Around him, the battle collapses quickly. Zeros fall burning into the sea. A few Americans go down, but most pull away trailing smoke, damaged, still flying. The Americans don't chase the survivors far. They reform above the fleet, orbiting like sentries. The Japanese formation ceases to exist. Tanaka manages to limp away, engine barely holding, vision blurred by fumes. He will survive the morning. Many will not. Later, reports will call this a failure of training, of fuel, of numbers. But Tanaka knows the truth. Expectation killed more pilots than bullets. They expected the Americans to fight the old war. They expected skill to overcome steel. They expected the sky to reward bravery. Instead, the sky rewarded preparation. As Tanaka lands on a battered airstrip hours later, he shuts down the engine and sits in silence. Mechanics swarm the plane, staring at the holes punched clean through the wings. One of them whistles softly. "That American plane," he says. "It hits hard." Tanaka nods. It doesn't just hit hard, it endures. And in a war of endurance, realization comes too late to save those already lost. Save the lesson written in the sky. By 1945, the lesson is no longer subtle. It is written in wreckage scattered across the Pacific, twisted aluminum on coral runways, shattered canopies floating in quiet lagoons, empty flight decks where squadrons once stood shoulder to shoulder. Japanese pilots still climb into the sky. But they do so knowing the truth. American aircraft are no longer surprises. They are inevitabilities. In briefings, instructors no longer speak of outturning the enemy. They speak of survival, of choosing when not to fight, of avoiding Hellcats entirely when possible. That alone says everything. The Americans dominate altitude now. Their fighters sit above the battlefield like loaded springs, engines humming, waiting for targets to expose themselves. When they dive, it is controlled. When they climb, it is assured. And when they take hits, they keep flying. Japanese pilots see it again and again. Hellcats returning with wings chewed apart, tails holed by cannon fire, cockpits spattered with blood, pilots wounded but alive. They land. They fly again. Japan cannot replace what is lost at the same rate. Veteran pilots fall faster than new ones can be trained. Hours in the cockpit shrink. Missions become shorter. Desperation creeps into planning. So does fatalism. Some pilots are sent aloft knowing they will not return. Aircraft are stripped of weight not for performance, but to carry bombs instead of fuel. The sky becomes a place not to master, but to sacrifice oneself within. The Americans notice the change. Intelligence reports speak of reckless attacks, of lone aircraft diving straight into formations, of courage unbound by expectation of survival. But courage cannot rewrite physics. Steel still beats silk. Radios still beat hand signals. Teamwork still beats individual brilliance. The war in the air ends not with a single decisive battle, but with a quiet, merciless consistency. Every engagement tilts the same way. Every loss compounds the next. For Japanese pilots who survive to the end, the memory that lingers is not fear, but disbelief. Disbelief that they ever thought agility alone could win an industrial war. Disbelief that the Zero, once feared across the Pacific, became obsolete not through inferiority of pilots, but through misunderstanding of the enemy. The Americans did not outfly Japan. They outlearned them. They accepted weakness, built around it, and turned it into doctrine. They expected their pilots to fail, and planned for it. That expectation changed everything. When the war finally ends, the skies fall silent. But the lesson remains, echoing far beyond 1945. Wars are not won by what you assume your enemy cannot do. They are won by preparing for what he inevitably will.